Horrorscope with Jerry and Matt.
Hey, good evening. Welcome to the Weekly Horrorscope. I'm your host, Jerry, here with my co-host, Matt. And
Welcome.
this week we are going to talk about the werewolf genre. And we're specifically going to break down a couple films, a couple famous films from that specific subcategory. We're going to talk about The Wolfman from 1941. And we're going to jump up to 1981's American Werewolf in London. And then we'll kind of summarize the subcategory as a whole and take her from there. Well, good evening, Matt.
Good evening.
You want to start us off walking through the Wolfman?
Yeah, Wolfman from 1941. It was actually the first time I'd ever seen this movie. So it was
Really?
it was the first time I'd ever seen it. I've seen, some of the classics, the Universals when I was younger, but not much I can really remember. So watching this was for the first time. It was very interesting because you have to learn to separate the fact that it was a different era of story. I mean, it's 80 years old. So, I mean, there's a different, there's so much that changed in society as far as like social norms and just from the way you tell a story to just the way movies are made. It's short film. It's only like,
Just over an hour.
it's just over an hour. Right. Which also is part of the strength of the movie because there's no fat in the movie. It's just real. Every scene has its purpose, and it's just bang, 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 and it's just right to the point, which is actually kind of refreshing.
It
Ironically,
is. It does create some, in my mind, questionable plot decisions
yeah,
to do that. And there's a
yeah,
couple things I made note of that, like, this doesn't really make any sense. But you're
right,
right. It's a lean.
right,
It's very atmospheric.
right.
It's
Very atmospheric, actually. Yeah,
Yeah. So the movie starts with Lon Chaney Jr., real name Creighton. The
hmm.
studio forced him to change his name to take advantage of his famous father.
Oh wow,
He just comes home to his estranged father after his brother's death, and there is no detail given, right? We don't know what happened to the brother. We
right.
don't know where the mother is. We don't
Right.
know why they're estranged. And he's back, and everything is just
Yeah,
like he never left, right?
yeah. So, which I mean, which is interesting because those are two major tragedies to happen to the father and the family. So
Right.
already the story is predicated on tragedy, and it's like,
Hmm.
hey, son, come on,
And,
yeah,
and they
yeah.
don't
They don't investigate
reconcile
that.
in
Nope.
a moment of sadness or shared grief.
Right.
It's
It's just,
just like
yeah,
he went to the grocery store and came back, and he's like,
right.
"Hey, I'm home."
And it makes me wonder, going back to those social norm things, what was it like that back in the 1940s? Was that how a father and son were? Like, it's like, get over it,
Right.
or is that just them telling the story in an hour and saying we don't have time for this?
Right. The
Right?
first thing that struck me was how much larger, um, from what I
On
found,
Cheney,
Lon Chaney Jr. was like 6'2", 220,
yeah,
and he towers over his father, which I just found an interesting dynamic when they walk in. And
yeah,
the father is a person of power in the town, so he has that power dynamic despite being diminutive next to
right,
his huge son.
yeah. It's funny. It's the casting for that was interesting, but then at the same time, I don't know if there was a better actor for his father. It was well done. It was well acted.
Claude
So
Rains,
yeah,
very good
yeah,
actor.
yeah,
But just the size disparity struck me as kind of funny, and it comes up later in the
yeah,
story where
yeah.
it may or may not be relevant.
Right.
But
Which is funny because at the same time, we're we have to suspend our belief for the entire movie because it's about a wolf man.
yeah,
But those are the things we'll nitpick about.
right.
Right, right.
Yeah. So uh, Larry starts out by assembling a telescope or working on a telescope in his
Yeah.
father's attic.
Which is 8 feet long and can only see across the street.
Yes, but is perfect for peeping in the window
Yeah,
of a young woman named Gwen,
yeah.
which is again, you talk about the difference in eras.
Yeah, yeah.
2021, you're in
Right.
cuffs immediately,
And cuffs, and that's the end.
as you should be, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
No story there.
right.
And he proceeds to to go to her store, which she, old times, she lives above her store,
Right.
tells her that he was peeping on her, and then
Expects her
demands
to
a
go.
date and won't take no for an answer, even though she says no numerous times.
Yeah. I'm
Again,
I'm engaged. He's like,
2021 just wouldn't fly.
yeah.
And he's supposed to be the good guy, the hero, the antagonist or the protagonist, and we're immediately like, it's kind of creepy, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is. That back then it was like, no, he's doughy-eyed and charming, and he's naive and innocent. But
Yeah.
then I also started to think about it, and maybe it's because I'm looking at this from the lens of like this, this modern era of like looking at how we look at things. So, like, was the tragedy that befell him part of like was that like character fall that was like that written into it on purpose? Was he written to be a creep, and that's like, hey, this is he has these character flaws, and that's why this kind of happens to him as a curse? Because he only turns into the Wolfman trying to save a woman he had no business pursuing.
Well, and I made note of that when he hears the screams, he immediately takes off, without regard for his own
Right.
for his own well-being, to rescue the girl he's pursuing's friend,
Right.
which definitely demonstrates heroic traits, even though he's done questionable things to get into that position.
But he would have never been in that situation if he wasn't like lusting after a woman he never had business lusting after.
No, true.
Right. So, I mean, that's kind of like maybe like the whole him being creepy was done on purpose, because like, hey, if you act in this manner, it will lead you down a path in life that will ultimately burn you from the inside. You know, it will do nothing but cause destruction for you and everyone around you.
The duality of man.
Right.
No one is all good or all bad.
Right.
We're all shades of gray somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
No, excellent point. So he won't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
Ends up showing up at her home, and she's out there ready to go.
Yeah.
So so much for sticking with her no.
Yeah.
So the
And she's
three of
like,
them
okay.
go off, which I found very interesting. The three of them go off to the gypsy crew to have their fortunes told. And the great Bela Lugosi plays the fortune teller,
Yep.
and is actually the first werewolf in the movie. What I find out is he knows he's a werewolf. He's out there at night reading fortunes. How does he not expect something to go horribly wrong? Talk about questionable storytelling.
Yeah.
He knows he's a werewolf. Hey, come on into my camp. I'm going to sit down with you.
Yeah.
And of course the palm. When he's reading her palm, she sees the sign, the pentagram.
Yeah. Right.
Which identifies the next victim, and then we lead into her running, screaming, and Larry had just happened to buy a silver-tipped wolf cane.
Yes. Yeah.
And of course can use that to subdue the werewolf and kill the werewolf, which turns back into Bela Lugosi's character, the gypsy.
Yeah.
No violence. There is absolutely no blood. The beating with the cane takes place off screen.
Yeah.
You don't see any of it, which is a stark change to films
And
today.
they used it was interesting how much like they had all the fog, and it had that like that Castlevania Frankenstein-esque, like it was just a lot of fog, and almost felt like this European town kind of, it was almost like that, like, because that's where the werewolf, that's where the myth comes from, right? Like it comes from like I might be wrong, but like the medieval, maybe not the medieval, 1700s, like Europe. Was that really where it originated?
Well, and this but actually both movies we're going to talk about take place in Wales.
Right.
So
it was
it's definitely a European mythological
and
lore.
they did a great job recreating that I don't want to say like that's how it is, but like that old school European medieval foggy,
that atmospheric mood.
Atmosphere, exactly. You're right. Right.
The film was praised during its release for exactly that, creating this creepy atmospheric mood. So once he kills the werewolf with the silver walking stick, the police come upon the scene to find uh, Bela Lugosi's gypsy character,
Yeah.
instead of a wolf, murdered, with the walking stick being the clear murder weapon,
Yeah.
yet pursue no action against Larry.
No.
And in fact, when the police chief questions Larry, the doctor pushes back and says, you don't want to cause him too much stress. I found that a little humorous and another convenient
Yeah.
plot turn, that the doctor would carry so much weight in a police investigation.
Yeah, well, it was funny watching that scene because I remember thinking like they didn't have any forensics back then whatsoever. I don't think like they were just kind of like, yeah, he's fine. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It didn't appear you needed much
yeah.
forensics to
No,
standing
yeah,
there and
yeah. You
hitting
could
it, but
they just decided things right there. There was no pictures, there was no tampering with that. Yeah, just there was no red tape. It was like that's all right. We know
and you got the
we got
impression
it from
his
here. We got it from here.
yeah. Well, you got the impression that maybe his powerful father's role in the community pulled
Yeah,
some sway there. Another
small town. Yeah,
example of rich versus poor, guilty
yeah,
versus innocent.
yeah. That's definitely there. That's an element in it. Because that's
Uh,
part of the character is that he's this rich, wealthy young guy comes in. He's mid-30s, and he's got swagger. He's going to come in and just do what he wants. He's twirling his cane and he's taking someone's girl. He doesn't care. Yeah, there's kind of that they're creating that image of wealth and do
mhm.
whatever we want. Yeah, the
Yeah,
big
above the
telescope. We
law.
look in people's houses above the law. Yeah. So and then all these, all of these things that they're doing to create the atmosphere and the image of the character makes you go, well, is he really an innocent good guy?
Yeah,
That they maybe I think it was all written that way on purpose
yeah,
because
yeah.
you go down that road in life and it's just like, man, maybe this is what happens. This is the person who gets cursed.
So the Bela Lugosi character, his mother, the gypsy Maleva, comes to Larry, doesn't seem the least bit upset that he killed her son, explains to him what happened, what is now going to happen to him,
Yep.
and then gives him a charm to prevent him from turning, which, again, plot hole. If this charm works, why didn't she give her son one?
Yeah, why didn't he have it?
Right?
Yeah.
Uh, so
And maybe she did, and he gave it to the mom, and that's why she had it.
yeah, yeah.
We could
Who knows?
assume. We could assume, right? It's not.
Now, Larry doesn't believe in the powers of the charm, so he in turn gives it to Gwen, which, of course, if it works, renders it useless because she's not the werewolf he is.
Right.
Um, so either he doesn't believe it or he doesn't understand what it's designed to do. We don't really know.
Right.
Um, so the next night, surprise, surprise, he turns into a werewolf and ends up caught in a police trap because the police, even though they had a clear suspect, decided they're going to lay traps out and try to,
Yeah.
catch whoever's prowling the moors, killing off gypsies. He gets caught in a trap. But Maleva comes to him once again, delivers a spell to change him back before he gets caught by the
Yep.
hunting party. So now he finally does believe that he is a werewolf.
Right. And he's able to just walk away.
So far, the true hero of this story is Maleva,
Maleva,
who
yeah.
helps everyone except her own son for some reason.
Right.
But anyways, so he goes to say goodbye to Gwen, sees the pentagram on her palm, right?
Mhm.
We know what that means. So he goes home and tells his dad he's a werewolf. This is where the size thing registered to me as being
Yeah.
because he wants to leave town, and he thinks he's a werewolf. And he tells his dad, "I've done these awful things." His dad doesn't believe him, and somehow grapples the 6'2", 220-pound man with werewolf blood in his
With werewolf
veins.
blood, yeah.
Yeah, and ties him to a chair.
Yeah.
So in that chair is where we see the first glimpse of a transformation scene, something that is become iconic in werewolf films. Is
Yeah.
you got to have the transformation scene. Well, we really didn't get a transformation scene other than his feet. We get his lower legs
Right.
and we
Right.
get his feet. and it's very, it's stop motion. It's
Yeah.
and I understood they were using yak hair, which sounds awful, but
Right. It's
so
probably
we don't get a full
expensive. Right.
transformation. You
Well, you
know,
can imagine it. You imagine how expensive it was probably to do something like that back
sure,
then, especially in the very beginning stages of trying to navigate special effects in those early days. You
sure,
know, with the limited resources maybe that they had or understanding of what they could or couldn't use. That was probably what they obviously had a budget. And they were like, "Look, we have X amount of money for the scene. What
yeah,
can we do?
yeah,
You know what I
right,
mean? It's like, all right,
right,
we'll be creative." That might have been the most creative thing they could have done with the money they had. You
sure,
know what I mean? Like, which we have to assume was, yeah.
sure,
So it was, yeah, it's innovative because all of a sudden he's a werewolf with a different shirt on.
right, right.
Where did he get the long sleeve? Right, they had to use a long sleeve shirt to make sure
It
that
might have
okay,
been
we
cold
can't
out.
show
He
us.
stopped and changed before he took off. You don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah. So he transforms, breaks free of the chair, and he's out going out to attack Gwen,
mm,
fulfilling the pentagram prophecy. And lo and behold, his character is beaten with his own silver-tipped wolf cane by his father, who thinks
yeah,
he's killing a wolf. And then the dramatic conclusion, where we do get a reverse transformation, where they use the dissolve technique, and the werewolf body
yes,
slowly turns back into the human body of Lawrence Talbot, and Gwen is there watching in horror,
yeah,
even though she's technically with another guy,
yeah.
uh,
That
and the
guy's standing
father's
around like,
there,
what's going on? Yeah, the whole
and Lawrence Talbot is a tragic character, victim
Mhm.
of circumstance, and dies at his father's hands. So kind of full circle from the grief of the first brother.
Isn't his dad kind of in denial about it?
Yeah,
Like the
he
whole
was the
time,
whole way
the whole
until
way. Yeah,
the change
yeah,
took place in front of him, and he saw he just killed his own son. So
yeah. So
uh,
it's ultimately just a horrific tragedy for the father because he lost both his kids.
sure,
Right. Yeah.
sure. I also found it interesting in the Universal monster,
Universe. Yeah.
grouping. Um, he's the non real bad guy. We talked about some of his character flaws, but his character
Right.
is a victim of circumstances, not a pure evil creature.
Well,
Uh,
right. Yeah. It's not. I wouldn't call it evil. I would. You want to almost call it. You know, I don't want to say naive, but yeah, you could call it naivety, I guess. But you know, a blind eye kind of thing, like choosing not to look at how your actions are affecting you or other people around you.
sure.
Like he's kind of acting in a selfish manner. He's kind of acting in a juvenile delinquent mindset.
Hmm.
He's 35. He's his father's rich. He kind of just had everything given to him. It's very juvenile mindset. Well, I want this girl, so I'm going to make her mine. Well, I want this cane. I'm just going to buy the expensive thing, and I'm just going to kind of do what I want. And he kind of comes in there and he doesn't really have any goals or ambitions for running the company like his dad wants him to. He's kind of like, I just want to go chase girls and go have fun.
Sure,
I want to
sure.
go to the carnival. You know what I mean? Like he's not like staying up late trying to write budgets. Like he's like, I want to go to the carnival and chase girls around and very juvenile.
And
It's almost like if you don't grow up, you turn into this, tragedy befalls you.
yeah, the
You know?
worst of you comes
Right.
out.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought about that too. If you want to, if a girl's working at a store and you really want to go in to have a conversation with her, don't you get like a pack of gum? What's a silver tipped wolf cane
Yeah.
cost in 1941?
Right. It was
Seems
like
excessive.
$18,000 or
Yeah,
something like that. $3,000, something
yeah,
stupid.
it's like
Yeah.
three cars. But I'll just pick one up because I wanted to flirt with the girl.
Right.
So interesting story. The design of the when we see him in full Wolfman form, we don't get to see the transformation, but we do get to see the full makeup and costume. Was actually designed for Universal's first stab, um,
Hmm.
Werewolf of London, with a completely different storyline, but they scrapped that makeup
Interesting.
design because they thought the actor's face needed to be more prominent so
Hmm.
that the audience could tell who it was. Obviously, that movie wasn't very successful, and this movie became what we considered the standard from the old school Universal.
Interesting.
Um, and you go through, Frankenstein, the doctor is clearly mad, at least if not evil, with a god complex, and he's clearly identifiable as a bad guy. Dracula is clearly a bad guy. The Mummy is clearly the bad guy.
Evil, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only comparison, it may be the Frankenstein's monster, who is also somewhat of a victim of circumstance, although horrific in presentation, but
Right.
didn't really do anything to deserve to be there per se. So I
Well,
found that interesting.
Well, you know what? You could say that's an allegory to life, and we could get into we'll have to do Frankenstein at a later episode. But none of us, I think there's the word in philosophy called thrownness, where we're just thrown into the world, right? We're just thrown into this time. Why do you exist now instead of 1800? Right?
Yeah.
Like we're just thrown into time, and we have to deal with it. We have to confront our own reality and mortality. And so, it's too bad Frankenstein never did that. Could have been a good guy.
He just wanted a woman. Other interesting note, speaking of Frankenstein, that werewolf design was designed by Jack Pierce, the legendary makeup artist that did the Frankenstein's monster.
Oh, wow.
And again, I find it interesting that 80 years later, when you see
we're
Halloween
still using
costumes,
that design. It's
these
incredible.
are the images that are
it's
recognized.
Incredible.
Yeah,
it's just iconic. Didn't he play Frankenstein as well?
Yes, Lon Chaney. Played all of those.
He played
He's
Mummy.
the only actor that played the werewolf or the Wolfman, Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Mummy.
Dracula. He played Dracula's son, right?
One of the sequels. I'm not sure which one.
Something. Yeah.
He was proud that he was the only actor that played all those four iconic roles, and he was also very proud that he was in all the sequels. He was the guy who played the Wolfman.
He played it 5 times, didn't he?
The Wolfman was his and his alone.
Yeah, he did.
Very proud of that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right, so that wraps up the Wolfman, 1941. We're going to jump forward 40 years.
40 years
to the American Werewolf in London. American Werewolf in London, directed by John Landis, who previously was known for comedies, Kentucky Fried Movie, Animal House, The Blues Brothers. So people were a little unsure what to expect, but this is very clearly a horror movie.
Which is funny because nowadays horror and comedy to me are they're so intertwined. They could become the same thing. They're both celebrations of the absurd, right? I mean, when you watch, you could break it down. Like if you see someone like physical comedy, right? Yeah. If you see someone fall down and you laugh, it's like, well, that's a horrific thing that happened to that person. Yeah. But you laugh about it. It's a celebration of just absurdity. Yeah. And so
they fall down the stairs and get up with their hat askew. You laugh.
Right.
They fall down the stairs and snap their neck.
And it's a horror movie. Right. So it's just like, it's like such a thin line. And I love when movies marry them together because especially when writers and actors and directors just know that line. It's just done so well. And plus you also bring levity to the horror too. Like if you see something horrific and then you have some comic relief, it kind of puts you on this emotional roller coaster. And then you can kind of have them both going together and you can create this insane dance of theatrics that it's hard to compare that to anything else in film, in my opinion. I look at some horror movies and I think they have more fun on set than comedy movies.
Sure. I don't doubt that for a second. Yeah.
Yeah.
So our two young Americans are backpacking through Wales, of course, because if you're going to make a werewolf movie, you have to go to Wales. Right. And they enter a pub called the Slaughtered Lamb, which I just think is a wonderful name.
Perfect.
And of course, the design on the wall is the same pentagram mark that we saw as the indicator for the next victims. One thing I found odd about this story is the bar patrons want them out. They kind of torment them and get out. You got to go.
Yeah.
And then
we don't take too kindly to your type around here.
Yeah. Oh, and then they tell them you need to stay on the road.
Yeah. But also be safe.
Yeah. Which doesn't make sense. And then they end up showing up during their attack to help them. If you wanted to help them, why didn't you just let them stay? Why'd you throw him out in the first place?
Well, they
That
didn't
really-
want to. They didn't want to. The bartender said, "What are you guys doing? You guys are
Yeah.
drunk."
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
just like
They were like, "No, he's good as dead." And they're like, "Listen, what are we doing here?" Yeah, it was the bartender that kind of talked him back into it. The guy was like, "All right," like rolls his eyes. Let's go
how
help
hard
him.
would it be to just let him stay, right? Like it wouldn't have been that big a deal.
Yeah.
So interesting. We talked about some questionable morals and ethics from Larry Talbot,
Mhm.
but when the group does get attacked, the main character David Kessler, played by David McNaughton, immediately turns and bails on his friend. His friend who
Yes.
really didn't even want to be there.
Right. Right.
He dragged along for this backpacking
Right.
trip.
Well, it tells you, he's a coward, right? Like,
Yeah,
he's a coward,
gone.
right? Yep.
You're on your own. He does come back,
When he realizes he's safe,
but yeah, it's a little too
right.
late. At
It's
that point.
after he realizes he doesn't hear the wolf anymore. He's like, "Oh, I'm safe," and then he comes back to his rationale, and he's like, "Oh, maybe I could go back and help him." But in the heat of that moment, he was a coward, right?
He does get scratched. He gets a little bit of attack from the wolf before it is shot down by the bar patrons.
Yep. They show up
which
just
is-
in time.
Yeah, just in time. Which again, just pull up a chair and have a pint, and none of this happens.
Right.
Probably wouldn't be as interesting a movie.
Right.
What I found odd is they show his injuries, and he's got like 3 scratches on his chest.
Yeah. It's on
fairly
his chest,
deep,
right? Yeah. Yeah.
but he's out for 3 weeks. Nothing that happened to him. Do you go, well, that guy's probably in a coma for 3 weeks? Like, he's got scratches, literally.
The only explanation is that that's what happens when you're transfused with the blood of a werewolf curse. So there was right, but again, they don't say that. No one. It's just you have to kind of use your imagination with it, right? Like you have to be like, all right, so if a werewolf attacks you, maybe you're down. Maybe you're out for a couple weeks because something internally is happening, and right, it's already beginning. It's kind of like an alien thing, like an alien. Like like there's something inside of you, like they kind of go out, like you have something developing inside of you, like so the werewolf's kind of developing inside of him at like a genetic level, and so that's why he was out for so long and starts having nightmares and hallucinations because he's just transforming internally, right?
Yeah,
but you have to use that to your own imagination, or else you're right. It's like, why would he be in the hospital for 3 weeks?
Yeah. Well, I thought it was a convenient plot line to push him forward towards the next full moon.
Yeah.
Like they had to eat up time.
That's a good point too. Yeah. And then, well, it's like if this guy has how come his family's not looking for him? He's been gone for 3 weeks and no one cares.
Right. Yeah. Well, he was apparently just backpacking and no idea when he was coming.
But it was
back.
the early '80s. There was no cell phones or pagers, and maybe that's just how it was. I don't know. I wasn't around the early '80s.
Yeah. I was a little kid, but
yeah, I was just being born. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's how people traveled. You just kind of went and did your thing.
Yeah. Well, the medical facility he's at seems to also lack a bit of professionalism. One nurse comments about she was peeking at his junk while he was under. And another nurse.
Classic '80s, Jerry.
Yeah. This isn't Porky's though. This is, I guess, that falls under the humor they're trying to bring forward. But
it definitely shines through in almost every scene.
So at this hospital, apparently they are not very busy. They have time to peek under all the covers and to assign a nurse just to sit with a man sleeping.
Right.
And the doctor has time to go off on the investigation on his own because the police aren't going to investigate. The funniest part to me was Frank Oz, and this is 1981. He pops in, and he's from the U.S. Embassy, and the funniest thing in the world is hearing this buttoned up character with Yoda and Miss Piggy's voice telling this guy what he should do. Well, it probably wasn't as funny at the time, but he's in it for literally 10 seconds and then gone.
Then he's out of there.
And these doctors are also incompetent because they're telling David that he was attacked by a lunatic that escaped from a mental asylum, and you can clearly see his marks are not from human hands. Again,
there's no forensics. It's early '80s. Forensics apparently weren't invented yet.
Yeah, something like that. So when the nurse is assigned to just sit with him all night, when he wakes up, she gets in bed to read to him. He starts giving her inappropriate glances, kind of mirroring the forwardness of Lawrence Talbot. He's inappropriate.
Right.
But again,
Yeah.
must be the wolf blood in their veins. His inappropriateness works, and the nurse goes for him, right?
Yeah. Well, and then he kind of, which is actually one of the funniest parts of the entire movie, when he says, "I'm a werewolf," and then she says, "Come back to my apartment."
Yeah.
It's like some
perfect.
Beauty and the Beast thing. She's just like, great.
Yeah. You're either this murderous creature,
right,
or you're mad. Either way,
it's hot. Come on. Yeah. Like
either way. Yeah. Either way is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, in the hospitals where he first gets visited by his friend, who was deceased, but shows up to talk to him and explain what happened. Fantastic effects. Hold up very, very well.
David,
the tears and the ripped neck, and the flesh is hanging. It
still holds up to this day.
It is. It
holds up. The whole movie holds up to this day.
And a lot of special effects from the 80s do not hold up in this era of CGI. This is beautiful. I mean, if you can call a ripped neck beautiful, but it's beautiful.
Right, it is.
It's done so well.
Just watching when I was watching it, I was just like, "What? This still looks legit. Like this still looks like I don't know if you could do it better. Like it's just that you just hit like a certain point where it's like this is how it's done.
Yeah,
you know, they laid down the template for these kinds of things. It was incredible. It was the first movie to ever win an Oscar for special effects.
Yes, like they invented an award to recognize this film,
right?
Because they had to do something.
It was so good. Yeah,
the award didn't exist, and you know, we haven't got to the transformation yet, but it is the gold standard of all transformations still to this day.
Yeah,
and it was 41 years ago.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So it's been longer between this movie and today than it was from the Wolfman to this movie. And the leaps that we made from 1941 to 1981, we don't have anything similar to show in the next 41 years.
We've got CGI. That was it. It was just CGI, and then it just plateaued. And the CGI at some point maybe feels worse. Like I'm not sold on everything being CGI. Like I think we need more of the old school special effects. I think that's where it's at. I think it's more creative looking. It's more realistic looking. There's a better appreciation for the art of doing it. It has that hands-on feel, like where, you know, someone put the work in to make the special effect.
Sure.
It's just, you can make a more, and I hate to, you know, make a pun here, but like the blood curdling effect, because, you know, you can make that bubbly effect. They can do all sorts of interesting things. It's almost like magic. It's almost like the David Savini, like when he talked about, like, it's basically like being a magician behind a camera. You know, you're manipulating the audience, right, with effects.
And if you compare, you know, take a CGI transformation like the wolves in Twilight. Right. The guy jumps over a log and in the air he becomes a wolf.
Yeah. It's just CGI. Yeah. Cool CGI. Like, video games do that too. Yeah.
Emotional impact. The transformation that David goes through. Yeah. With the bones popping and the skin stretching and the jaw elongating. Yeah. And the fingers and the feet stretching out.
Using the sounds of like broken celery stalks that you could tell. They use something like that, but it makes sense. Like, bone breaking. You know, like
every tendon is pulled and every bone.
Can hear the stretching.
You know, there's a gravity to that just says, wow.
It's intense. Yeah, it's intense. And it's Blue Moon by like Frank Sinatra or whatever's playing.
Yes. I have that in the notes. Every single music accompaniment through the entire movie has Moon in the title.
Wow.
Which is, you know, perfect. John Landis being funny.
Right. It is. Yeah. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So he goes back, he goes home with the nurse, which of course, you know, we're everyone's going to be inappropriate in the 80s.
Yeah. Why not? And they're young and single, you know, they're in their 30s and single. They're doing their thing. Yeah.
Do what they got to do. Yeah. That's where he gets the second visit from his deceased partner. And I found it interesting. The effects are still fantastic, but they actually changed to show a level of decay which I thought was a beautiful touch, because
Yeah.
the first ones are so good. They're
Yeah.
fresh, they're raw, they're bloody, but now
Yeah.
you start to see a little bit of rot.
Which I actually really liked, because it again, to use your word, it puts a gravity on the situation. And it's like this, his scenario is getting worse.
Yes.
It's not like he's just showing up like, you know, it's not like he's just showing up like, hey man, what's going on? Like, he's like, you got to listen.
Yeah.
Like, this is getting worse for me. You know, I'm going to be a puddle of mud eventually. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's almost like the ghost, what is it? The Ghost of Christmas Past. Like, he's
Yeah.
he's showing up trying to warn him. Yeah.
Yes.
There's that like comic feel to it. You know, like the deceased friend is like, hey man, yeah.
Yeah. But he's telling him that this is what happens, and this chain can only be broken by the end of the werewolf line, which means he's telling him you got to kill yourself.
Yeah.
You know, is what he's trying to
And
convey.
and that whole and throughout all of the comedy in the movie, and the fact that the horror of transforming into a werewolf, there's this huge like underlying tone of suicide in the whole movie.
Mhm.
Right? Because what he's done is he's betrayed his friend as a coward.
Mhm.
He's gone through something horrific by watching his friend die. He wakes up in a hospital. He's in a completely foreign land away from his family. He doesn't kind of know where he is. He's in this other country. And so he's gone through something like traumatic that he's trying to deal with, and no one believes him. So there's this whole underlining like landslide of like it all coming down to like suicide. You know,
Mhm.
like he can't deal with the drama of the trauma of what's happened to him.
Sure.
You know, and it's just it's more tragic. It's
Yeah.
more tragic because it's tragic that what happened to him as turning into a werewolf, but he also can't cope with anything that's happened to him. So you know, it's there's a huge huge underline of suicide in the movie, which is interesting because they just top it off with comedy and horror.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
in 1981, suicide
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily a hot button topic,
Right.
and taken as seriously as it is today.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, it's something you know you just don't make light of. But here's his friend, almost in a humorous appearance, telling him, you know, the only way to fix this is you gotta.
Yeah. Which is
And
dark in itself, which is the
yeah,
dark comedy. Yeah. It's just
yeah,
it's such a layered, brilliant movie. You know, to be able to pull that off in the way it does, you just don't see a lot of movies like that.
yeah. So the nurse Alex goes back to work, because obviously we know she's so busy at her job, but she goes back into the office, leaving him alone all day. Um, he's killing time around her apartment. He's doing this, he's doing that. That's when he gets the second visit. But then night comes, and that's when we get the epic transformation scene,
Yeah.
and he's gone, and he's prowling around London, and he's stalking, and he's killing a couple that's going around the back entrance
Hmm.
to their friend's house. And what I thought was an amazing scene with some great cinematography was when he's in the subway.
Yes.
There's actually a shot going straight down the subway, and it's lit up.
It's like the
And
corridor with all the posters, right? Is that what you're
yes,
talking about with the business guy, and he like turns around and you see all these like posters. Yes, I love that.
yes, and then it ends with him coming up the stairs, and we have a downward view all lit up, and we just see the terror on his face.
Yeah.
I thought that was beautiful.
It was
It's scary.
right.
It's edge of your seat, and the cinematography was just
And
beautiful.
it's interesting. It's cool how they were able to very minimalistic as far as not overexposing the viewer to the werewolf too much.
Yes.
It does a couple things. You don't get a chance to nitpick at the how the werewolf looks, or like, oh, this looks cheesy, and that you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
you only show it like enough times to where it can incite the horror of what it's supposed to be, and then also kind of keeps it in like the realm of the shadow. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Because like it's this thing that comes from the dark and gets you. You know,
Which
and
is always creepier than seeing it all the time.
right. I mean, going back to, I mean, even if you look at the original, you know, Halloween, right? You never really see,
Yeah.
just yeah.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. Very, very well done. Uh, then he wakes up in the wolf enclosure at the zoo the next morning, which again I found odd, that this wild creature would put himself in a prison. But maybe that's the part of him trying to repress these feelings.
Of all the scenes in that movie, when he stands up naked, that's the one I go, oh.
Yeah. Well, and then to make it creepier, he stands up naked and he goes and hides in a bush.
Yeah.
And then calls a little boy over to steal his balloons.
Yes. Yeah. The balloon
naked
scene.
man in a bush calling to a little boy. Again, arrested immediately.
Yeah. They spared. They pulled all stops for the comedically for this movie, and then later he's in the dress and he's like, "What?"
Yeah. I wondered why he woke up with no blood on him. I thought that was interesting. He was mutilating people all night. You would have thought there would have been signs of this, struggle and tearing people apart, but there were not. I thought that was interesting.
Unless he fell in some water, I don't know.
Yeah. But the other wolves came and licked him clean.
Yeah, they licked him off. Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah. So now he believes his friend. He goes back to Alex's house and he believes he's a werewolf, and he wants to be locked up. Kind of a humorous scene when he goes to, I think it's a Piccadilly Square.
Yes.
And tries to get the cop to arrest him. He just won't arrest him. Yeah. He's just blowing him off. Thinks
being
he's
a jerk.
Goofy American. You know? So
it's another actually great comedic scene. Like the movie is just like the way they insert humor into all these tragic things. They'll take the classic tragic thing from the original Wolfman 1941, right? Like, I've transformed. It's just like, it's this really epic, like it's supposed, this part of the movie where it's supposed to be really intense, but then they throw in this humor. And they keep doing that each time. They take this intense scene. Here's a scene that's supposed to be intense as far as a werewolf movie goes. We're going to layer it with that humor. And they just do it so beautifully. Like that cop scene, I thought it was hilarious.
And a thousand movies have tried to do it, and it's hard to balance it well.
Yeah.
And this movie does.
Yep.
He gets called over to an adult theater. He sees his friend one more time, and he wants to talk to him.
Yeah.
And
they're having this incredibly, like, the one of the most intense conversations of the movie.
Yes.
And let's just throw in some porn.
His friend has deteriorated further. His rot has further down, but now also he's joined by all of his victims from last night.
Yeah.
Who are also present at the theater.
Yeah.
And he gets a real picture of all these people will continue to be stuck in this purgatory because of what you are and what you're doing.
Yeah. Here's the effect you're having on everyone else, which is interesting because it's actually that's actually the anti-suicide thing, right? Like that's the anti-suicide story. The anti-suicide story, but like, listen, if you commit suicide, here's the effect you're going to have on all of your family members and people that know you. If you commit suicide, it's like an intervention, right? But that's what you would have, like a suicide intervention of all these people you're going to affect. But it's in this sense, they've flipped it over on its head and said, if you don't commit suicide, all of these dead people are going to continue to suffer. It's really interesting how they flipped the whole suicide theme in this movie on its head.
Yeah. So of course, night is falling. I don't know what time the adult theater opens, but I don't know that noon on a Tuesday is the A crowd, but dark comes in and he transforms in the theater, which again, another not the same transformation scene, just a quicker version. And he starts terrorizing people in the theater. He busts out of the theater.
Yep.
And now there's a crowd control scene.
Yeah.
Where I noted that the cops did a terrible job because people keeps coming towards the scene of this tragedy.
The car crashes.
Nobody's going away.
Yeah.
And the crowd keeps getting bigger and moving in closer, and the police are not keeping them away.
Yeah.
And Alex arrives, realizes it's him, realizes the story is true. She pushes through 10 cops like they were made out of paper mache.
Hell have no scorn, like fury like a woman scorned, right?
Yeah. So she approaches him in an alley, realizes it's him, tries to talk to him calmly, tells him that she loves him. There's like a moment of pause, a moment of possibly recognition in his eyes. and then he starts to lunge,
Right.
and the cops all take him down immediately.
Yep.
And then we get the shared ending from the Wolf Man, where
It's
the
just
wolf turns back into
yeah,
the man.
and it's the perfect way to end a movie like that, because like what else would you expect? You're like,
Yeah.
there's no other better ending. Like that's the perfect ending for a movie like that. Like that's obviously what's going to happen.
There can't be a happy ending.
There can't be, right. The whole movie is predicated on tragedy, and it's punctuated on that tragedy. You know,
Yeah.
there's no like, oh, I learned my lesson, and he's eating Cheerios the next day. You know what I mean? Like, there's
You're right. Yeah. Yeah, you can't learn the lesson. That's
Right.
for sure.
Yeah.
I did find I found it interesting that if you look at when they staged the final shot in the alley, if you look at where he was located,
Yep.
and you look at Alex's approach and where the police were,
Yeah.
they had no shot at him.
No, she would have got shot. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
They had no clear shot at him.
I thought
whatsoever.
the same thing. I was like, she would die too, right? Like, but no,
Yeah.
they, yeah.
Yeah, which what if you're trying to save her, you can't shoot her. That doesn't make sense. But
right, because it's a direct line. So yeah.
I also noted the use of some low to the ground, fast moving tracking shots, very reminiscent of Sam Raimi and Evil Dead.
Oh, interesting.
Although he extended them much farther and made more of a signature out of
more
it.
of like the panoramic, you mean? Yeah.
Where you're the perspective of the spirit moving through he did some of that with the wolf, and it was very similar perspective.
Oh, interesting.
I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, like paying homage to that style and kind of like carrying it forward in the genre of horror. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's a cool, it's a cool shot.
Yeah.
1981 was the year of the werewolf movies. If you look at most top 10 lists, they include the two we've covered. They also include The Howling, which is 1981,
which competed in the box office with American Werewolf, right? That same year.
Yes, but
failed
maybe not the
same month. But yeah, didn't they? They were both box office that year. Yeah.
And another film called Wolfen, which was more of an urban jungle technical. The only thing of note of that movie, in my opinion, was they used the infrared camera, like from the wolf's point of view, so you could see his victims in infrared, which was used in the movie Predator.
I was going to say Predator, right? Yeah,
they used it much more effectively than this movie. But I found myself, as we were preparing for this, Matt, I found myself wondering. It's been 41 years. Where was the next great werewolf movie?
That's a great question. If anyone tells me Twilight, then I immediately will not be friends with them and don't want to hear from them anymore.
Yeah.
Because that's the highest selling stuff we have right now. Yeah, what is? They had the 2010 remake with Benicio del Toro, didn't they? Was that 2010?
Yeah, they did, and
but
offered nothing new.
Offered nothing new, right? It wasn't like, it was just kind of their attempt to have new lighting or something. I don't know.
You have Wolf with Jack Nicholson, which I heard they decided to make that movie because he looks like he's halfway through the transformation at all times. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I heard. 80s had a couple, A Company of Wolves was a film that was Little Red Riding Hood lore that used the wolves.
I remember that. Yep.
Silver Bullet, based on the Stephen King Cycle of the Werewolf novella, which is a decent movie, but actually suffers from exactly what you mentioned. When they show the wolf, you can really pick it apart because it doesn't look
right.
That great.
Yeah, when they do too much, you do too much, and you just get into that realm of CGI. Even with CGI, too much CGI. If it's too much CGI on the screen, if the character's all CGI, it's like you just see it.
Yeah. There's a werewolf segment of the movie Waxwork, which I believe is 1988. But honestly, you're right on. It's an underserved segment of the horror film. You have Ginger Snaps.
Ginger Snaps is another great one. We could have easily picked that for one of for this segment, for this episode, and maybe in the future we'll probably have to cover it.
Sure. But from 1981 to 2022, you're really left going, what's the great werewolf film in there?
Yeah.
And I don't know that we have an answer. So.
Right. Which is in itself a tragedy, much like a werewolf film.
So
Yeah, it's a self-serving genre because the werewolf is a tragedy in itself, and the tragedy is that there aren't a lot of good werewolf films, as many as we need. It would be interesting to see a new take on it. See, that's what I like that American Werewolf did, is that it just had this new kind of take on it. Like I
Sure.
said, it added the comedy, it had the underlying the backdrop of suicide in it, like in it, which added a layer of depth, and it was just very good storytelling. Like, we need a new way to present the story.
Yes.
I think we can. It would be interesting, even if you did something, if you wanted to go a little sci-fi and maybe an alien comes to Earth and that alien somehow has this power and it's a new take on it. I mean, that could be a little cheesy, but there could be a new way to tell the story that we haven't done, that they haven't done yet.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely think we need something.
The only other thing is there are certain like, I guess the modern version could possibly be like cyborgs or cybernetics, where like a person like integrates themselves with AI and becomes like a new thing that's horrific. There was a movie, I'm trying to think of it. It wasn't Gamer. There was some movie where this guy had augmented himself with artificial intelligence and fake body parts, like made of like robot and stuff. And he became a new person, and he became an evil thing. And he started killing people. I mean, I guess that's a new age take. You know,
Sure.
you could kind of take, but it's not the classic werewolf. I think there's room to make one. You know,
I do. I agree.
yeah.
All right. Well, that's our take on werewolf movies. That's our analysis of two of the most famous.
Yeah.
You want to give
Yeah. Well,
social media context?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, let us know what you guys think in the comments below, and if you have anything to say or add to it, for us, for the YouTube followers, and you can reach us out on Twitter.
You can always email us at theweeklyhorrorscope@gmail.com.
Yep.
We'd love suggestions, feedback. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover, a movie you'd like us to cover, we'd love to hear it. That wraps us up for this week. And our next topic is a great one. We're going to do prison horror. And that's, we've got some interesting films to break down for that.
Can't wait. I can't wait.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, everyone.
Your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.